Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? I asked myself that question over and over, sitting in the empty kitchen that used to smell like my daughter-in-law's cinnamon rolls. My hands, trembling slightly, clutched a mug of tea I wasn't really drinking. It had all started at the school reunion, the moment that changed everything. I had been excited to see my grandchildren, Emma and Lucas, both bright and full of laughter, running toward me across the gym floor. But then I saw her, my son's wife, Amanda, smiling in that way that hid something dangerous behind her polite eyes. And before I even had a chance to say hello, she whispered something to the school administrator. Something I couldn't hear at first, but the look on the administrator's face told me everything. By the time I reached the front of the room, Amanda had done it. She had changed my last name on the school records. My own grandchildren, my Emma and Lucas, no longer saw me as Grandma Thompson. To them, I had become someone else entirely, a stranger who had no right to step into their school life. I remember standing frozen, my heart pounding, feeling like the floor beneath me had given way. I tried to call my son later that evening, but every call went straight to voicemail. My texts weren't answered. My messages to Amanda? Ignored. And then, slowly, I realized that this wasn't just about the school records. My emergency contact information had been changed, my place in their lives erased. It didn't make sense. How could a grown woman married to my son rewrite the story of my family so completely? I had been the one who rocked those babies to sleep, who baked cookies for school events, who sat on the sidelines cheering for every soccer goal and spelling bee victory. And yet, overnight, I was nothing. I sat on my porch that night, staring at the dim glow of the street lamp. The memories flooded in. The first time I held Emma in my arms, the tiny hands clutching my fingers, the way Lucas had giggled at my silly voices. I remembered Christmas mornings, birthdays, summer afternoons in the garden, teaching them how to pick strawberries without squishing them. Every memory felt like a thread being cut, one by one. The next morning, I tried again. I called my son, hoping it was just a misunderstanding. "Charles," I said softly when he finally picked up, "I don't understand why I can't reach the kids. Did something happen at the reunion?" There was a pause, long enough to feel like my heart had stopped. Then he spoke, and the words felt like ice in my chest. "Mom, Amanda, she said it's best if the kids, have some space." Some space? Some space for me? My own grandchildren? My stomach twisted. I felt a cold hand close around my chest. "Charles, what are you saying? I don't understand." I I just think it's better this way, Mom. Please, just trust me." Trust him? My own son had handed my heart over to someone else's control. And Amanda, she had taken something I could never get back. My role as Grandma Thompson. Over the next few days, I tried to make sense of it. I checked every mailbox, every online school portal, every contact list, and everywhere I looked, her fingerprints were there. She had systematically erased me, changing my name, my access, even how my grandchildren were taught to think of me. And the worst part? Emma and Lucas didn't even seem to notice. They smiled politely when I passed, but there was a hesitancy in their eyes, a pause in their laughter that had never been there before. I started keeping a journal, writing down every call that went unanswered, every blocked message, every tiny act of exclusion. Each entry made me angrier, but also more determined. This wasn't just about hurt feelings. This was about family. This was about rights, about history, about the love I had given them all their lives. One evening, I tried to reach out again, sending a long email to my son and Amanda. I wrote about the memories, the traditions, the birthday cakes and scraped knees I had patched up. I wrote about how much I loved my grandchildren, how I had always been there for them. And then I waited. Days passed, weeks passed, silence. It was in that silence that I realized something frightening. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. Amanda had built a wall between me and the people I loved most in this world. And Charles, my own son, was standing behind that wall, letting it grow taller every day. I remember the first time I cried in the kitchen. It was late, the house quiet, and I sat there staring at the empty chairs at the table. Emma and Lucas would never sit there with me again, at least not without Amanda's permission. I felt betrayed, not just by Amanda, but my own family, by a system that allowed one person to rewrite a lifetime of love and history. I realized then that I had a choice. I could sit in my grief, let the silence swallow me, or I could fight. I didn't know how, not yet, but I knew this: I was not going to disappear quietly. I would find a way to reconnect, to remind my grandchildren who I was, to reclaim my place in their lives, even if it meant going against my own son. That night, I made a decision. I would gather every piece of evidence I could: school records, photographs, emails, old letters, even social media posts. Every memory that proved my love, my presence, my role as Grandma Thompson, I would collect it. And then I would find a way to make the world see what had been taken from me. The next morning, I opened my photo albums. The smell of old paper and faded ink brought back a flood of memories. Emma's first steps, Lucas's messy birthday cake, our summers at the lake. I looked at each photo, each note, each keepsake, and whispered, "You will not forget me, my loves. I will not let this happen." Little did I know, this was only the beginning. The battle for my grandchildren's hearts had just started, and the path ahead would test every ounce of courage I had left. I would need patience, strategy, and a relentless spirit. And most of all, I would need the love that only a grandmother could hold. Because once a grandmother's heart is broken, it doesn't just mend on its own. You fight, you endure, you do whatever it takes to remind your grandchildren that you were always, always there. And I was ready. I thought that after the reunion, maybe it was just confusion. Maybe Amanda would realize what she'd done and fix it. But when I tried again to reach Emma and Lucas, it became painfully clear this wasn't confusion, it was deliberate. At first it was small things: calls that went straight to voicemail, messages on their school apps that vanished without a reply. Then came the blocked numbers, my phone buzzing angrily only to tell me it wasn't welcome. My heart would sink every single time. I tried not to cry in front of the neighbors, but the tears came anyway, sliding silently down my cheeks as I stood in the garden. I went to the school hoping to speak with the principal. Maybe someone could explain why my name had been changed. But the principal looked uneasy, as if walking into a storm I couldn't yet see. "I'm very sorry, Mrs. Thompson," she said. "It's complicated. There's been a request from your daughter-in-law to update emergency contacts and family names. Legally, we had to comply." Legally? That word sounded like a hammer striking my chest. "But I'm their grandmother," I whispered, almost to myself. "How can this happen without my knowledge?" The principal shook her head. "I'm sorry, truly, but Amanda provided all the documentation. It's considered valid. She asked for privacy, for the children's sake." Privacy, for the children's sake. The words sounded hollow, like a knife twisting inside. Amanda had rewritten history, and no one was stopping her. Not the school, not my son, not anyone. When I got home, I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at my old tea set, the one my mother had given me. My hands shook, my chest tight. I had raised my children, and now, it seemed, someone else had the power to erase me. I tried calling my son again, leaving messages filled with calm words, hoping that reason would reach him, but each day the silence grew louder. It wasn't long before the first confrontation came. I ran into Amanda at the grocery store, a place I had visited weekly for decades. She was standing by the checkout line, perfectly composed, smiling at a friend. When she saw me, her smile didn't falter, it sharpened. "Hello, Mrs. Thompson," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "It's nice to see you here." I felt a flush of anger. "Amanda," I said carefully, "why are my grandchildren no longer able to call me? Why was my name changed everywhere?" Her smile didn't waver. "Oh, that. I thought it would be simpler for the kids. We're just trying to create a sense of unity in the family." Unity? I wanted to laugh, but it came out as a sob. Unity? You've erased me. You've made me invisible. These are my grandchildren. My life has always been here. Amanda tilted her head, her eyes calm, almost condescending. "I'm sure you mean well, but some things are better left in the past. The kids, they don't need confusion. They have a new family structure now." I couldn't believe it. My own daughter-in-law was speaking as if she had the right to decide my place in my grandchildren's lives. And worse, my son had not even defended me. I left the store feeling hollow. The familiar streets of my town suddenly seemed strange, almost hostile. Every neighbor who waved felt like a reminder that life continued around me, but I was being left behind. At home, I began writing letters to Emma and Lucas, even if I knew Amanda would intercept them. I wrote slowly, carefully, choosing words that might pierce the wall Amanda had built. "I love you more than anything. Grandma Thompson is still here. No one can take that from you." I didn't send them. I wasn't sure if they'd ever reach the children, but writing them made me feel a little less powerless, a little more human in a world that seemed determined to erase me. Weeks passed. Amanda's control over communication tightened. Emergency contacts at the doctor's office, school, and even extracurricular activities listed her exclusively. I couldn't attend parent-teacher meetings. I couldn't pick up Lucas after soccer practice. Every small ritual that once tied me to my grandchildren was slowly stripped away. I started keeping meticulous notes, each blocked message, each changed record, each cold interaction. I realized I might need these someday, evidence of my presence, proof of the life I had shared with them. I couldn't know when or how, but I felt an almost instinctual certainty that one day this would matter. One night, I sat with an old photo album, tracing my fingers over the faded edges of pictures where Emma's chubby hands clutched mine, and Lucas's tiny feet padded across the living room. I whispered, almost like a prayer, "I will not let you forget me, my loves. Not now, not ever." It was also around this time that the first hints of support appeared. A few friends who had known me and my family for years offered advice. "You might want to talk to a lawyer," one suggested gently. "Grandparents have rights in some cases, especially if a parent is blocking contact." A lawyer? That word sounded foreign, but necessary. I was just an ordinary grandmother, not used to courtrooms or legal battles, but as I thought about it, the decision became clear. If I didn't act, I would be completely erased from their lives. So I began the first step in a long, difficult fight. Researching grandparent rights, making calls, gathering documents, and trying to understand the legal language that seemed designed to confuse. Every page I read, every note I took, was a step toward reclaiming my place. But even as I took these steps, Amanda's shadow loomed large. Each day, it seemed, she had a new way to keep me out. Each day, my son seemed to drift further, letting her rewrite our family story, and each night, I cried silently, knowing that the people I loved most in the world were being turned against me. And yet, something inside me refused to break. This fight was not just about legal rights. It was about love. It was about memory. It was about proving to Emma and Lucas that no one could ever erase the bond we shared. I didn't know then how long the fight would last. I didn't know how much I would have to endure. But I knew this: I would not give up. My grandchildren would remember me, and I would remind them every day, every moment, that Grandma Thompson had always been, and always would be, there. It was one thing to be blocked from phone calls or emails. It was another to realize just how thoroughly Amanda had rewritten my grandchildren's world, and how much my own son had allowed it. One Saturday morning, I decided to visit the park where Emma and Lucas often played. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could catch a glimpse of them, even from afar. As I approached the swings, I saw them laughing, but not at my jokes, not at my silly faces. They ran to Amanda, clinging to her like she had always been their only guardian. I felt my chest tighten. My own children, my grandchildren, treating me like a stranger. And in that moment, the betrayal hit hardest. Not Amanda alone, but my son. Charles had always been kind, protective, but now he let it happen. He let his wife rewrite the story of our family. I returned home that afternoon, shaken and exhausted. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my journal. Writing had always been my refuge, and now it became my strategy. I documented everything: the park encounter, the blocked messages, the school records, the calls my son refused to take. Each entry became a piece of armor, a small step toward reclaiming what had been stolen. By that evening, I realized I couldn't wait for Amanda or Charles to change. I had to act. I made my first call to a lawyer who specialized in grandparent rights. I explained the situation, my voice trembling at times, but firm. "She's taken my place in my grandchildren's lives," I said, "and my son, he's letting it happen. I need to fight for them. I need to see them. Please tell me I can." The lawyer was kind but serious. "Grandparents do have rights," she said carefully, "but it's complicated. The courts usually favor parents' decisions. We'd need evidence that being kept away is harming the children, or that it's unreasonable. You'll need documentation, witnesses, proof of your role in their lives." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "I can do that," I said. "I have photographs, school records, letters, memories. I've been with them every step of their lives." "Good," she replied. "Start gathering everything. Keep a detailed record of each blocked call, each attempt to visit, every interaction. It will matter." The next few weeks were a blur of phone calls, paperwork, and quiet planning. I combed through old photo albums, dug up school certificates, even old artwork the children had made for me. Every scrap of memory became evidence. I printed copies, wrote letters explaining each connection, and organized it all meticulously. But Amanda wasn't idle either. She seemed to anticipate every move, every attempt I made to maintain contact. Invitations to events were subtly worded, so I wouldn't receive them. Messages went through her first. Even my friends who had tried to help were occasionally stopped or warned off. She had created a perfect invisible wall around Emma and Lucas, and she had help. The first real confrontation happened at a parent-teacher conference. I had arrived early, hoping to speak to the teacher about Emma's progress, but Amanda was there first, smiling at the staff, charming them effortlessly. When I tried to approach, she stepped between me. "Oh, you're here too," she said sweetly, with a faint edge. "I'm handling everything for the kids. No need for confusion." I froze, stunned by the audacity. "They're my grandchildren," I said firmly. "I have every right to be involved in their lives." Amanda laughed softly, a sound that sent a chill through me. "Of course you do, but sometimes love is knowing when to step back. I'm protecting them, not hurting them." Protecting them. It felt like a lie I could see through in every word. Amanda wasn't protecting anyone. She was erasing me. And my son, my own child, stood silently by, offering no defense. By the time I got home that night, I felt drained, but not defeated. If anything, the betrayal strengthened my resolve. I realized that this fight wasn't just about access to the children, it was about truth. It was about making sure Emma and Lucas understood who had loved them unconditionally all their lives. I began drafting a formal petition, consulting with my lawyer on the correct steps for filing for visitation rights. I knew it wouldn't be easy. The courts often defer to the parent, and Amanda had painted me as a well-meaning but intrusive grandparent. I needed to prove the depth of our relationship, the history we shared, and the harm caused by her exclusion. At night, I would sit with my memories, whispering to the empty rooms, "I am here. I have always been here, and I will fight for you." Those whispered words were my mantra, the force that carried me through the growing tension. And yet, there were moments of quiet sorrow, too. I missed birthdays I could not attend. I longed for the sound of Emma's laughter, the way Lucas held my hand when he felt nervous. Every absence cut deeper than the last. It was a pain unlike I had felt before, an ache that went straight to the heart. But I also knew that if I stopped, if I gave up, the children would lose not just my presence, they would lose the story of their own lives, and I couldn't let that happen. So I pressed on. Every call, every note, every scrap of evidence became part of my plan. I wasn't just a grandmother anymore. I was a guardian of memory, a protector of love, a fighter for justice in the only way I could. The battle had begun, and I was ready. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest I had ever faced. Every day brought a new reminder of what Amanda had taken from me. Another missed school event, another blocked message, another small ritual that had once tied me to Emma and Lucas, now gone. But I refused to let despair take me. I had made a decision. I would fight for my grandchildren, no matter the cost. My first step was organization. I turned the spare bedroom into a command center. Photo albums were spread across the bed, letters stacked in neat piles, old school projects carefully cataloged. Every scribble of their tiny hands, every note, every certificate became proof of the bond I had shared with them. I created a timeline documenting each birthday, holiday, and milestone I had attended. I spoke to friends, teachers, and neighbors who could testify to my involvement. I collected statements from anyone who had ever seen me with the children, playdates, school concerts, soccer games. Each story, each memory was another thread in the case I was weaving, another way to show the court that I had been a constant in their lives. Even so, Amanda continued to tighten her grip. She blocked my access at every turn, refused to let me attend school events, and somehow persuaded Charles that I was overstepping. My own son had become a reluctant enabler. The betrayal stung more than I could put into words. I would never have imagined that my child could be swayed against me, but here we were. My lawyer, a calm, sharp woman named Janet, became my guide through the maze of legal procedure. We need to show consistent involvement, evidence of emotional connection, and harm caused by exclusion, she explained. Courts are reluctant to interfere in parental decisions, but if we can prove that the children's well-being is affected by your absence, we have a chance. I nodded, listening intently, my heart pounding. This wasn't just a fight for visitation, it was a fight for the truth of our family, for my place in Emma and Lucas's lives. I realized that the emotional weight of this case was heavier than any courtroom drama I had ever imagined. Janet guided me through drafting affidavits, compiling evidence, and preparing testimony. Every document was painstakingly reviewed. I practiced speaking clearly and calmly, imagining the judge across the room, trying to convey not anger, but love. My voice had to show devotion, not resentment. I had to remind them that I was not intruding, I was preserving the bonds that Amanda and circumstances were trying to erase. Even at home, I rehearsed conversations with the children in my mind. I imagined explaining why I hadn't been able to see them, why I had to fight to be part of their lives. I pictured Emma's wide eyes and Lucas's small hands clutching mine. Those mental rehearsals strengthened my resolve. I would not let Amanda's version of our story stand unchallenged. During one particularly quiet evening, I looked at a photograph of the three of us, Emma, Lucas, and me, on the porch steps at my house. They were smiling, sun on their faces, pure joy in their eyes. I whispered to myself, "I will bring you back. I will make sure you remember." The words weren't just a promise, they were a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't powerless. But even as I prepared for the courtroom, the tension at home was unbearable. Charles had become more distant, sometimes cold. Our conversations were clipped, his defenses gone, replaced with vague excuses and evasive answers. Amanda's presence loomed like a shadow over every interaction. My own son had chosen her version of the family over mine, and it hurt more than I could describe. Then came the first taste of hope. A neighbor, Mrs. Lawson, called to tell me she had witnessed Amanda preventing me from picking up Lucas after soccer practice. She agreed to write a statement. Another teacher, who remembered me reading to Emma's class every Friday, also offered a written account. Piece by piece, the wall Amanda had built began to crack, at least on paper. Janet and I worked late into the nights assembling binders of evidence, photographs, and affidavits. We prepared arguments, rehearsed statements, and anticipated counterarguments. It was exhausting, stressful, and emotionally draining. But every night, as I closed the binders and turned off the lights, I reminded myself why I was doing this. Emma and Lucas deserved to know me. They deserved a grandmother who had loved them since the day they were born. I began to see a strategy forming. The court would need to see consistent proof of my involvement and the impact of my absence. I realized that Amanda's attempts to rewrite history could be challenged, that the truth of our relationship could speak louder than her manipulation. And so, armed with memories, evidence, and a stubborn determination, I stepped into the next stage of my fight. I was no longer just a grandmother feeling powerless. I was a fighter, preparing to stand up for my grandchildren, for the bond that Amanda had tried to sever. Even in the quiet moments, I could feel the weight of what was coming. The legal battle would not be easy. Amanda would resist. Charles might falter, and the children would be caught in the middle. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty: I could not back down. Because if I did, my grandchildren would lose not just my presence, they would lose a part of themselves, a part of their own story. And I would not let that happen. The morning of the first hearing arrived faster than I expected. My hands shook as I clutched the documents I had spent weeks preparing. Every binder, every photo, every affidavit felt like armor, protecting me against the uncertainty of what lay ahead. I was nervous, yes, but underneath the fear, there was a determination that had been quietly building for months. Janet, my lawyer, gave me a reassuring nod as we walked into the courthouse. "Remember," she said softly, "we're here to show the truth of your relationship with Emma and Lucas. Speak from your heart and let the evidence do the rest." The courtroom smelled of polished wood and nervous energy. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. The judge, a woman with kind eyes but a firm expression, motioned for us to begin. Amanda sat across the room, composed and cool, her arms crossed as she met my gaze with a faint, challenging smile. Charles was beside her, his face unreadable, his eyes avoiding mine. When it was my turn to speak, I walked slowly to the stand. My voice trembled at first, but as I began recounting the memories, the birthdays, the school plays, the quiet moments reading bedtime stories, the words began to flow naturally. I described the mornings Emma would curl into my lap, Lucas's laughter echoing through the house, and the traditions we shared. "I have loved them all their lives," I said, my voice steady now. "I have been there for every scraped knee, every celebration, every tear. I am their grandmother. I am part of their story." The judge listened quietly, occasionally glancing at the documents and photos I presented. I could see Amanda's composed mask beginning to slip slightly as she shifted in her seat, but she remained determined to present her side, arguing that her control over the children's activities was in their best interest. Charles didn't speak much, but I noticed the conflict in his eyes. He had once been my defender, my son who laughed at my silly jokes and comforted me in hard times. Now he seemed trapped, unsure where he stood, caught between his wife's influence and his mother's plea. The hearing stretched on, with testimony from neighbors, teachers, and friends. Each person shared stories of my involvement, recounting playdates, school events, and family traditions. Slowly, the truth of my bond with Emma and Lucas emerged. The court could see that Amanda had systematically limited my access to them, isolating me from the children in ways that went beyond ordinary parental discretion. Yet, despite the evidence, the courtroom was tense with uncertainty. The judge asked questions carefully, probing Amanda's motives and my own intentions. It was a delicate balance. I had to show love, not anger. I had to prove the depth of my relationship without attacking Amanda personally. At one point, I paused to take a breath, my eyes filling with tears as I thought of Emma and Lucas. "I am not here to create conflict," I said softly. "I am here because I love them, because I have always been here, and because they deserve to know their grandmother, to hold her hand, to hear her voice." The judge nodded, taking notes. Amanda shifted uncomfortably, her earlier confidence waning as the weight of witnesses and evidence pressed against her story. Charles still remained silent, but I could see his guilt, the quiet acknowledgement that he had allowed this to happen. After the hearing, Janet walked me through what had happened. "You did beautifully," she said. "The judge saw your sincerity, your dedication. Now it's a matter of waiting for the court's decision and preparing for the next steps. Amanda will likely respond, but you've made a strong case." Walking out of the courthouse, I felt a mix of exhaustion and relief. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in months, I felt that maybe, just maybe, the wall Amanda had built could be breached. My grandchildren could remember me. They could have their grandmother back in their lives. That night, I sat with my tea, staring at the empty chairs at the kitchen table. The silence was still heavy, but it no longer felt suffocating. I whispered to the memories of Emma and Lucas, promising them that I would continue to fight, to prove that love and family ties cannot be erased by fear or manipulation. The battle had begun in the courtroom, but the heart of it, the love for my grandchildren, would carry me through every challenge. I knew the road ahead would be difficult. Amanda would resist, Charles might falter, and the legal system could be slow and frustrating, but I was no longer powerless. I was ready. Because one truth was clear: love cannot be blocked, erased, or rewritten, and as long as I drew breath, I would fight to reclaim my place in the lives of the two little people who had given my life its brightest light. After the first hearing, I thought I could finally breathe. I thought presenting the truth of my bond with Emma and Lucas, supported by friends, neighbors, and teachers, would be enough. But Amanda had other plans. She was relentless, using every tactic she could to block me, to maintain the wall she had built around my grandchildren. The next week brought the first real setback. A letter arrived from the court stating that Amanda had filed a motion requesting a formal restriction on my visitation, claiming that my involvement might confuse the children and disrupt their daily routine. My heart sank as I read her words, carefully drafted to sound reasonable, even protective. But beneath the polite language was a single, cruel truth. She wanted me gone. I felt tears welling up, but I refused to let them fall. Sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by my photo albums and letters, I reminded myself why I was fighting. This wasn't just about pride. It wasn't about winning against Amanda. It was about Emma and Lucas and ensuring they knew who I was. the grandmother who had been there from their very first breath. Janet and I met immediately to strategize. "We expected resistance," she said, flipping through the binders of evidence. "Amanda will push back. She's trying to control the narrative, but we have documented proof of your consistent involvement. That's what the court will see." We spent hours preparing for the next hearing. Every affidavit, every photograph, every note of a school event or birthday celebration was organized meticulously. I practiced explaining my role clearly and calmly, focusing on love and care rather than anger. This fight was bigger than me. It was about preserving a relationship that Amanda tried to erase. The next hearing arrived, and the tension in the courtroom was almost unbearable. Amanda sat across from me, serene and composed, while Charles shuffled nervously beside her. I could see him glancing at me, a flicker of something, guilt, shame, or perhaps recognition of what he had allowed, passing through his eyes. Amanda's lawyer spoke first, painting a picture of a harmonious household under Amanda's careful management. "The children are thriving under our care," he said. "Introducing another adult into their routine without proper boundaries could cause confusion and distress." I listened quietly, my chest tightening with every word. The words felt like bricks being laid around my heart, each one trying to seal off the love I had for my grandchildren. But when it was my turn, I spoke clearly, every word from the heart. "I am their grandmother," I said, softly but firmly. "I have loved them since the moment they were born. I have been at every milestone, every celebration, every tear. I am not asking to disrupt their lives. I am asking to be part of them. I am asking to give them the love that only a grandmother can give." I presented the photographs, letters, and statements from teachers and friends. Each piece of evidence told a story not just of my presence, but of the bond Amanda was trying to erase. I could see the judge taking notes, considering each detail carefully, but Amanda's motions were aggressive, and I knew this would not be an easy victory. After the hearing, I walked slowly to my car, exhausted but determined. Janet whispered, "We did well today. The judge will consider everything, and our evidence is strong, but she will try again. We must be ready." That night, at home, I sat in the quiet kitchen staring at my empty chairs. Emma and Lucas's absence felt heavier than ever. I whispered into the silence, "I will not give up. I will not let them forget me." Despite the setbacks, I noticed small victories. A teacher mentioned that Lucas had asked about me during class, and Emma had drawn a picture of the three of us, insisting it was for me. Those tiny acts of remembrance became my lifeline, proof that the bond was still alive, even if Amanda tried to hide it. I realized that this fight would take patience and endurance. Amanda's resistance would continue, and Charles might remain distant, caught in the middle. But I also understood that love, truth, and persistence could overcome walls built with fear and manipulation. And so I prepared for the next hearing, determined to face every challenge with courage, armed with evidence, memories, and an unbreakable bond with my grandchildren. Because no matter how high the wall, no matter how stubborn the opposition, a grandmother's love cannot be blocked forever. The courtroom had become a place of tension and quiet despair, but also determination. Each time I walked into that space, I carried not just my own heart, but the memory of every hug, every laugh, every scraped knee I had comforted over the years. It wasn't easy. Amanda was relentless, and Charles remained unsteady, often avoiding my gaze. But I had a mission: to remind the court, and perhaps even my son, that my love for Emma and Lucas was unwavering. The next hearing began with testimony from the children's teachers. One by one, they recounted the moments I had been present, reading to Emma's class, coaching Lucas's soccer team, hosting holiday events at my home. Each story painted a picture of a grandmother deeply involved in her grandchildren's lives. I listened, my hands clasped tightly, my throat tight with emotion. It was validating, but also heartbreaking to hear others speak of the role I had always played while Amanda had tried to erase it. Then came the most unexpected moment. Lucas's teacher, Mrs. Benson, shared that Lucas had mentioned missing me in a quiet conversation. He said, she recounted gently, that he wished Grandma Thompson could come to the park like she used to. He said he felt like something was missing. My hands trembled. That small, innocent longing struck me deeper than any courtroom argument or legal document ever could. The children remembered. Amanda's walls weren't absolute. Emma and Lucas still carried traces of me in their hearts. During my own testimony, I spoke plainly, from memory and emotion. I have loved these children since the day they were born, I said, my voice steady now. I have been there for every milestone, every tear, every joy. I am not here to create conflict. I am here because I am their grandmother, and I want them to know me, to remember me, to feel my love in their lives. Amanda's lawyer challenged me, suggesting that my presence might confuse the children or create tension, but I stayed calm, explaining gently that love is not confusion. A grandmother's presence brings stability, continuity, and reassurance. I shared small anecdotes, how Emma had cried when she scraped her knee last summer, how Lucas had called me after he won a spelling bee because he wanted me to be the first to know. It wasn't just legal evidence anymore, it was emotional truth, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a shift in the room. The judge seemed to listen not just to words, but to the quiet weight of my years of care. The court was beginning to see what Amanda had tried so hard to hide, the undeniable bond between a grandmother and her grandchildren. Even as I left the courthouse that day, my heart was heavy. Amanda was not finished. Her influence over Charles and the children remained strong, and yet hope had begun to bloom. In small ways, I could see cracks in the control she had built. Lucas's longing, Emma's secret drawings, the teachers who spoke out, all these things reminded me that love endures even in the hardest circumstances. That night, I sat in my living room staring at old photographs. Emma with her first lost tooth, Lucas at his first soccer goal, both of them laughing with me on the porch. I whispered to the empty room, "I am still here. You may have tried to erase me, but I am not gone. I will always be your grandmother." And in that moment, I felt a quiet determination settle deep within me. The battle was far from over. Amanda would resist. Charles might falter. But my love for my grandchildren was stronger than any obstacle. I would continue to fight, to gather evidence, to speak the truth. Because in the end, love cannot be blocked, it cannot be erased, and a grandmother's heart, once connected, never forgets. The days after the last hearing were filled with a restless waiting that gnawed at my heart. Every morning I woke with the same thought. Had Amanda finally realized she couldn't erase me, or was this just the calm before another storm? My life had become a careful balance between hope and dread, between planning my next legal steps and holding on to the memories that no one could take away. Janet called with updates regularly, reminding me that patience was as important as persistence. "The judge is reviewing all evidence," she said. "Amanda will respond, and there may be more hearings, but the emotional weight of your involvement with the children is significant. That counts." I clung to those words, repeating them quietly when the waiting felt unbearable. But even as I tried to stay calm, the fear remained. What if the judge sided with Amanda? What if Charles continued to allow his wife to dictate the children's lives? What if Emma and Lucas grew up thinking I was just a stranger, someone who had once existed but no longer mattered? One afternoon, I received a letter from the court scheduling a mediation session. Amanda's lawyer had agreed to meet with Janet and me before the next formal hearing. The idea of sitting in the same room with her made my stomach twist, but I knew it could also be an opportunity. The mediation room was quiet, sterile, and tense. Amanda sat across from me, her posture perfect, her expression calm, almost unreadable. Charles lingered in the corner, avoiding my gaze. I could feel the weight of months pressing down on me, the blocked calls, the missed birthdays, the constant sense of absence. And yet I also felt the strength that had grown in me through every step of this battle. The mediator spoke first, explaining that the goal was to find common ground and ensure the children's best interests. Then Amanda began to talk, her words carefully measured. She spoke about routines, stability, and her desire to protect Emma and Lucas from confusion. Every sentence felt like a wall she was trying to rebuild between me and the grandchildren. I listened quietly, letting her speak without interruption. When it was my turn, I took a deep breath and spoke slowly, clearly, from the heart. "I am their grandmother," I said. "I have loved them every day of their lives. I have been there for every joy, every fear, every milestone. I am not here to disrupt their lives. I am here to be part of them. I want them to know that Grandma Thompson loves them and always has." For the first time, I noticed a subtle shift. The mediator nodded, acknowledging my words, and even Amanda's composure flickered slightly. I could see that the truth of our bond, the countless memories, the love, the care, was starting to break through her carefully maintained narrative. We discussed possible arrangements for visitation, schedules, and boundaries. Amanda resisted at every step, but the evidence we had gathered made it difficult for her to deny my role. Each small concession she made felt like a victory, even though I knew the battle was far from over. After the mediation, I walked out of the building feeling both exhausted and strangely hopeful. The walls Amanda had built around my grandchildren's lives were not as solid as they seemed. The court had seen my evidence, my words, and the voices of those who had witnessed my love and involvement, and in that I found strength. At home, I sat quietly with my tea, reflecting on the journey so far. The fight was painful, frustrating, and emotionally exhausting, but it had also shown me the power of persistence. Amanda had tried to erase me, but she could not erase the truth of the bond I shared with Emma and Lucas. I realized that this battle was about more than just court orders. It was about identity, memory, and love. My grandchildren deserved to know who I was, to remember the laughter, the hugs, the quiet moments that had shaped their lives, and I would not stop until they could. That night, I whispered into the silence of my home, "We are not finished yet, my loves. I will see you, I will hold you, and I will make sure you remember." The words felt like a promise, a lifeline, a declaration of unwavering love. Because no matter how many walls were built, no matter how strong the opposition, a grandmother's love is relentless, and mine would not be denied. The day the court delivered its partial ruling was one I'll never forget. I woke early, nerves twisting in my stomach like a knot I couldn't untie. Months of waiting, fighting, and hoping had all led to this moment. The courthouse felt heavier than ever, as if the walls themselves knew the weight of what was about to be decided. Amanda sat across from me, her composure flawless, her smile faint but calculated. Charles lingered nearby, his hands clasped, eyes downcast. I could see the uncertainty in his posture, the conflict of a son who had been caught between his wife and his mother for far too long. The judge began to speak, her voice steady but measured. After reviewing the evidence, testimony, and documentation presented, the court acknowledges the grandmother's significant role in the children's lives. The children have formed strong, lasting bonds with their grandmother, which are in their best interest to maintain. A flicker of hope surged in my chest that the judge continued. However, the court also recognizes the parents' primary role in determining their children's daily routines and environment. Therefore, visitation rights will be granted on a limited basis. to be expanded gradually based on cooperation and the children's adjustment. I felt relief, but it was tempered by the reality of limitation. It wasn't the full victory I had hoped for, but it was a step, a crack in the wall Amanda had built around my grandchildren's lives. I would see Emma and Lucas. I would be part of their story again, even in a controlled, cautious way. Amanda's face remained unreadable, but I could sense a subtle tension. Her carefully constructed narrative had been challenged, and the court had acknowledged my presence and importance in the children's lives. Charles still avoided my eyes, but I thought I glimpsed a flicker of something, a silent acknowledgement of what had been lost. The first scheduled visitation was nerve-wracking. I drove to the arranged location with my heart pounding, rehearsing what I would say, how I would interact, how to make Emma and Lucas feel safe and loved. When I saw them running toward me, faces lighting up with recognition, my chest swelled with a mixture of relief and sorrow. I had been away too long. They had felt my absence. "Grandma!" cried Emma, throwing her arms around me. Lucas followed, small hands clutching mine tightly. In that moment, the months of fighting, the court battles, the blocked messages, and the isolation all faded. It was just us, together again. The visit wasn't perfect. Amanda and her lawyer observed from a distance, and Charles remained awkwardly present, unsure how to act. But the children's joy was genuine, their recognition clear. I held them, told them stories, laughed and listened. Every hug, every smile, every whispered word was a victory that no legal document could take away. Afterwards, as I drove home, I reflected on the journey so far. The partial court victory was a beginning, not an end. Amanda would continue to resist. Charles might continue to falter, but the bond with my grandchildren had survived, and that bond was stronger than any manipulation, stronger than any obstacle. That night, I sat in the quiet of my home, surrounded by photographs, letters, and memories. I whispered into the silence, "This is only the beginning, my loves. I will be here for you every step of the way. No one can take that from us." I realized that the fight was not just about legal rights. It was about love, memory, and truth. Amanda had tried to rewrite history, to erase me from the story of Emma and Lucas's lives, but she could not erase what had already been written in their hearts. And I knew as I held their photographs close that the battles ahead would be hard, sometimes frustrating, sometimes painful, but every moment I spent with them, every smile and hug, every whispered, "I love you, Grandma," was a victory that no legal document could take away. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in months, I felt a sense of cautious hope. The wall Amanda had built was not impenetrable. The truth of our bond had been acknowledged, and that truth could never be taken away. Because a grandmother's love is relentless, unyielding, and eternal, and mine would continue to guide, protect, and nurture Emma and Lucas, no matter what obstacles lay ahead. The weeks after the partial court decision were a delicate dance. Visits with Emma and Lucas were scheduled, supervised at first, but each time felt more natural, more like the life I had known before Amanda had tried to erase me. Their laughter filled the spaces of my heart that had been hollow for months, and slowly I began to feel the weight of absence lift, just a little. Amanda, true to form, resisted quietly. She made subtle remarks, questioned routines, tried to maintain control. But the court had acknowledged my bond, and that truth could not be undone. I realized that I could not control her behavior. I could only control how I showed up for my grandchildren, and I was determined to show up fully, with love, patience, and unwavering presence. Charles began to change too. At first, his presence was awkward, hesitant, almost apologetic. But over time, I saw glimpses of the son I had known, concerned, loving, capable of acknowledging the wrongs without words. He started letting me take Emma and Lucas on small outings, attending school events and sharing family stories with them. It was slow, imperfect, but it was real. One afternoon, during a picnic at the park, Emma tugged my hand and said softly, "Grandma, I'm glad you're here. I missed you." Lucas nodded, shy but smiling, clutching my fingers tightly. Tears stung my eyes, but I held them back. "I missed you too, my loves," I whispered. "I'll never leave you again." That evening, I reflected on everything that had happened: the betrayal, the blocked calls, the letters, the court battles, and the long months of waiting. The pain had been sharp, but the journey had taught me resilience, patience, and the enduring power of love. Amanda had tried to rewrite our family's story, but the truth of our bond could not be erased. I thought about the future. It would never be perfect. There would still be challenges, disagreements, and moments of tension. But Emma and Lucas knew who I was. They remembered the grandmother who had held them through scraped knees and celebrated every milestone. And that memory, that connection, was unbreakable. In the quiet of my home, I opened an old photo album and traced my fingers over pictures of birthdays, school plays, and family gatherings. I whispered, "We made it through, my loves. We are together again." The words felt like a gentle promise, a lifeline connecting the past, present, and future. The story of betrayal had not ended with complete victory, but it had ended with love prevailing. I had reclaimed my place in my grandchildren's lives, and that was more than I could have hoped for months ago. Amanda could resist, she could manipulate, but she could never erase the truth: that I had always been their grandmother, that I had always loved them, and that I always would. Sitting quietly that night, I felt a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and hope. The journey had been painful, but it had strengthened our bond. Emma and Lucas would remember me, and I would continue to show up for them fully and unapologetically every day of their lives. Because love, real love, endures through betrayal, obstacles, and time. And the heart of a grandmother, once connected, is unbreakable. I whispered into the night, a promise and a blessing. We are together again, my darlings, always and forever.